Welcome to the Indie Wine Podcast. My name is Matt Wood, and this is episode 22. I recently sat down with Sabrina Tamayo of Ruby Blanca Wines. Ruby Blanca Wines is now on its third vintage, making wine in Richmond and working with mostly Italian varieties, including Ribolla Gialla, Barbera, and Nero. Sourcing grapes from Lodi, Sonoma and Mendocino. These are really great food wines. We discussed Sabrina growing up in Miami and Colombia, bouncing back and forth from New York and California to work harvests, working with the 280 Project, and art. I hope you enjoy. Here we go.
My first vintage, I did a direct press, 50%, and then the other half I macerated on the skins. This year, I really wanted to see kind of what the site was capable of, so I put 100% on the skins for about 3 weeks. And some of it did come with a little botrytis, which was kind of fun because it gives you like that full fruit character. But the skins on Ribolla Gialla are so savory that it kind of balances all out. And, just like Shannon, it doesn't lose, or like ferment, it doesn't lose its acidity. So really happy with kind of what it's at right now.
Yeah, it's really good.
So I've just been hitting the ground running for the last couple weeks, selling, get it in out there. So.
Yeah. How long ago did you bottle it?
Mid-March, but okay. I let it condition in bottle for a while before releasing it.
Yeah.
So once I feel like it's in a good spot, because it does definitely go through bottle shock, especially the first month. And then I'm like, okay, and taste it. I'm like, okay, now it's starting to taste what it tasted like before. So.
Yeah. So you grew up in Miami and Colombia?
Yes. So
splitting time?
So I was born in Queens, New York.
Okay.
Both my parents are Colombian immigrants. They met there. My mom was working at a Colombian bar as a cocktail waitress, kind of like that song.
Okay.
And so my dad came in and they met, and then they dated and they got married and they were together for 2 years. And then they had me in Queens. And then 3 months later, we moved to Colombia. So I was an anchor baby for sure.
Okay.
Because back in the 80s, you could get your citizenship if your kids, from the United States. So we definitely went back to Medellin and Bogota. My mom's from Bogota. My dad's from Medellin.
Okay.
So kind of wanted to see where they wanted to live. We were there for about 4.5 years. And then they decided to come back. So we moved back to New York. And then in the 80s, there was a mass exodus of Queens of all the Colombians. And we're moving down to Miami, Florida.
Okay.
So my parents followed suit.
Yeah.
And so I grew up there. And I would go to Colombia every year, 3 or 4 months. Maybe more than that, depending, definitely the 3 months in the summertime.
Okay.
A month in the wintertime. But I was there every year until I was about 14.
Is that visiting grandparents?
Yeah. My parents would just they're very modest in their jobs. So there was a summer camp for them. They'd get rid of me and then I would be, I would have the full benefit of my dad has 7 siblings. There's plenty to do there. My grandparents, everybody, all my aunts and uncles would dote on me and I'd go work in the family farm. And so farming is part of my background. We have coffee, cotton, bananas, cattle, the whole thing. When I grew up, there was just full family farm, all hands on deck. There was never a boring day. So
there's always something to do on a farm.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. And just being surrounded by a million cousins and just, it was great. It was a different, completely different disposition of how I grew up in the United States. I feel I would just be a little more wild out there. Just my family had land. So I would just be a pioneer on our farm and go up and get chased by bulls down the mountain and things like that.
Okay.
So it was really fun. Yeah.
Nice. How large of a farm was it?
I don't know the acreage now, because we did sell some of the land. Okay. But I do know that it was a full mountainside. So it was pretty big. My grandfather sold half the land to Colombia so they can put affordable housing and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I would say if I had to guess at this moment, probably 70 acres.
Okay.
Right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's planted to coffee, which they still farm, and it goes into basically they have their own little brand. My uncle studied agriculture in Costa Rica and has been trying to, do better things with the coffee farm.
Yeah.
but most of it goes to La Confederación de Cafeteros de Colombia. So like whenever you get like something that says Colombia on Folgers or whatever, that's just like a batch of all these farmers who like sell their beans to a bigger conglomerate.
Is it like a co-op thing?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah. It's like in English, it's like the Confederacy of Colombian Coffee Farmers or something like that. Yeah. And it just goes into a big batch, I guess, depending on what the roast is. And then, yeah. And then we sell some of our coffee, but I think in Colombia. And it's called El Oso. So the bear.
Yeah.
That's the name of the farm.
Yeah.
So.
Were you around wine as a child?
No. Colombia is not known for its like wine drinking. My parents don't really drink. Or I mean, now they do. But I would say, especially because they are Colombian and also, you know, they moved here, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago into the States. You know, even then, the United States was very young as far as other countries with like their wine drinking culture.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really part of my life until college, I would say. I studied, I went to the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And as I went through schooling, I worked in restaurants.
Okay.
And so once I started working in restaurants, my mind was exposed to a lot of different things. My parents are pretty, I would say, reserved in the way they eat. So once I moved up there, it was like, what's Indian food? What's Thai food? What's all these spices? Like, you know, things that Colombian food has a lot of savory qualities, but it doesn't have a lot of spice. So it's just like trying different things that I had never been exposed to because my mom's like, it's too spicy, you know? Like,
yeah.
So yeah, once I worked in restaurants, I kind of, you know, did that part-time for a while. And then I think my first fine dining job was in Morimoto in Philadelphia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was his flagship restaurant.
Yeah.
And they were like, you need to know, French varietals, you know how to properly open champagne. You have to like pass these wine tests. Okay. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what? What do you mean? What is Alsace? Like, what are these varietals that having it be sushi and Japanese, there's a lot of things that I definitely didn't know, but like German, Rieslings and all these things. But it was great because then I like jumped into that whole, wine world and dove deep. And then I started, doing the WSET, getting, certified, becoming a somm. I moved to New York. I worked in that, wine realm there for many years. So for many years, I worked in restaurants. And then I think it was 2014, my boss at the Dutch, Chad Walsh, he couldn't go to this wine thing that he got invited to, and he offered it to me. And it was called the Fingerlings Harvest House. Basically, they would take a bunch of wine professionals from New York, and you would do like a mini harvest in the Finger Lakes, and you'd all stay in the same house. So it was like the Harvest House. Yeah. And you'd go like work a harvest with one winemaker a day. And so everybody at the end of the day would bring their winemaker, and they would like talk about the things they learned, and we'd have a bunch of wine and we'd eat these great meals, and they had a little chef, and it was like, wait, what? So it was my first like dip into like the production side of wine, and I was like in love with it since then. And I was like, I really have to do this for real. So the next year I was like, I want to work a real harvest, like a long harvest. So I came out to California, and that was like my first year that I worked for a harvest. Okay. And that was with Rhyme Cellars. Okay. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. It's a great winery to start with. It was a great place to like get my feet wet. And they are honestly like, at the time they were at the Hasselane, I guess the co-op, or I mean, it was a working space like where multiple winemakers work. And it was really fun because I got to work with both of them, plus, Sam and Leo and Evan. So Sam of Idlewild, Leo of Leostein, and Evan Ruth Lewandowski Wines.
Right.
So got to learn a lot of different things, and it was all
bounce around like a little bit if somebody needed more. Yeah, help
absolutely.
That day,
I mean, everybody
and
would
were kind of off that if there was no harvest happening for Rhyme or something.
Everybody chipped in. If I needed to foot tread like Evan's, grapes, we would do that. Or if we, at the end of the night, we'd always like make sure everybody's taken care of and nobody's just like cleaning by themselves. So we'd all do everything together, which was pretty cool. But, awesome. But I definitely got to go and do vineyard trips with like Megan and Ryan and focus mostly on their stuff. But I had all those people as well. So
yeah, it's cool. You get to see how like 4 or 5 different wineries are kind of operating.
It was
in one go.
super fun and warm and hot. And it was just like, it was a really great experience. Yeah. I definitely was like, I want to do this forever.
Yeah. Did you end up staying in California after that, or did you head back to New York?
I went back to New York, and then I worked for another year. I was still on that SOM track, so I got certified, and I was looking to become the new SOM in my job. But then at the same time, I was looking for the next harvest. So the next harvest, I came out, and it was Bedrock Wine Co., which was really a great learning experience. We got to learn about a lot of historical vineyards, and it was like, again, bigger in production. So just got to learn a bunch of different things as well, and it was just a larger scale as far as what they were doing in the actual winery, and it was good to see the differences in those styles. Yeah,
and they source from probably a bit wider of a area.
I mean, I think all California winemakers at this point, you find a good vineyard, and it doesn't really matter how far away it is. It's like if you have a good relationship and it's kind of that sweet spot of what you want in the soils and the fruit, and it's good farming, then I think a lot of us will drive pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, okay.
During harvest, I'm like, I'm going everywhere, like Mendocino and Lodi and all the different regions. So yeah, but yeah, they do definitely get more in tonnage, I would say. Just a bigger winery.
Yeah. Was there anything specific that you learned, either your first harvest at Rime or at Bedrock, that you still kind of take with you?
I think there's just a certain amount of forethought, I feel like, I think every winemaker really has to think about what they want and what it means to them, and kind of pursue that idea, and kind of like do the most sustainably way possible. So I would say from the two of them, Morgan really loves to revamp these old historic vineyards, and his focus is like, what California used to be before they, ripped out all the old vines and put in Cabernet and Pinot and Chardonnay. And I think with Rime, they just had an idea of, what they like to drink. And, they like to drink a lot of the same thing I like to drink. I love Italian varietals. So it makes sense for here in California with our weather. It's a little more sustainable, to be honest, as well. So just like having things that you love, having that idea, and then kind of figuring it on your own, what you want to come from that whole experimentation, right?
Yeah.
So having a little more like forethought, I would say, is something that I thought about. It was like, what does this mean to me? Where am I going to carve my own path? And, seeing other people do that was important to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. What was your path after that second third harvest, I guess, at Bedrock?
So I ended up moving here, but I realized very shortly after that California is way more expensive than even Brooklyn. So I ended up managing some restaurants, kind of like following onto what I knew. So I came and I worked at Delfina restaurant. Yeah. And then I managed La Conda as well for them. And so I was there, working with wine and running the wine list, not purchasing. There was a mentor that I had, Sally Kim. She was kind of in charge of that. But every location has kind of like their wine steward. And so I was the wine steward in that location of like taking care of the cellar and running the list and selling it to the guests and things like that. So that was really fun. Then after that, I helped open Che Fico Alimentari. I helped open Dear Inga, which, again, Italian, and then the last one was like Eastern European focused. So it was really exciting to work with all these different varietals and just like a lot of history. And I really loved, we had this really beautiful like amber wine program.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So it was kind of like all of, you think of Georgia and Slovenia and like all these different countries that are known for their orange or amber wines. They had a really long and deep list, and a lot of people came just for those things. So I was like, this is very cool. Yeah, and then 2020 happened basically, and everything went to,
Yeah, it's kind of a disruptor.
Yeah, but it was great too. It was good for me because it was kind of a place where it was, life is short. Look what's happening around you. What did you come to California to do? Get to it. So it was good. It was a good kick in the butt for me. It was, eye-opening experience. And I really was like, well, all right, how am I going to make this happen? Through happenstance, I got involved with the 280 project, and Steve Mathiasen and UC Davis had this, vineyard apprenticeship program, which was really great because I really wanted to go back and work in vineyards.
Okay.
And I was like, where do I start? And as I'm trying to look for things, it just so happens that, Chris Renfro, he started this project, and I was just kind of in the right place at the right time.
Okay.
So, so I was in part of the flagship program. It was great. We got to work with a lot of different winemakers and growers and kind of figure out why they're doing the things they're doing without having to completely go to, Davis or some expensive program, and just get like a lot of hands-on time in the vineyard. So it was really cool.
Yeah, I was going to say you must have been one of the first through the program, but you're the first class.
Yeah, we were the. I have even since my elementary school, I've been the first class in my elementary school. It was the first elementary school that was sponsored by NASA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was Gilbert Porta, the School of Discovery in Miami, Florida, and then my high school was the first mega magnet of the United States. They had all the magnet programs, and mine was the arts and humanities program.
Okay.
And then, I was the flagship of this program. So it seems to be just following me around. It's my luck.
Yeah. What are some of the things that program kind of consists of for people that might not be familiar with it?
Well, it definitely likes to focus on kind of the folks that get left out of the conversation. So, geared towards like BIPOC, minority, queer, people who are interested in getting into the wine industry. And, in the history, we've kind of been the group that gets left out. So it was just kind of giving the opportunity of education, an opportunity to speak, an opportunity to be heard. So it was really great. It was a good experience and opened a lot of doors for a lot of us. So a lot of the people who were part of this program have, moved into starting their own brands and working for other, growers and other winemakers and, starting a lot of exciting things. So it was a pretty cool experience.
That's great.
Yeah.
Very cool program.
My partner had, during 2020, he works at Alemany Farm. So we were looking, I lived in the city at the time, and we were looking like everybody else to kind of get outside and to kind of be one with nature a little bit. So they had been talking about, about going and working on the farm. And so we went and we did this, we talked a bunch, and it was really like a fun experience. And then that's kind of how I kind of wiggled into this situation. And also I knew somebody else that was part of the kind of the flagship program. Okay. They were working for Mathiasen at the time. So just kismet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it takes sometimes.
But, good for him because he's the one that got it started. So that's great.
Yeah. So after that, is that how you got started at Le Lune?
Yeah. So
after the 280 project?
Le Lune was one of the vineyards that we went and we worked with. Okay. So Le Lune has a vineyard management company that they farm their own vineyards, and they also farm vineyards for other people. So we were we went to one of their clients' vineyards that they were replanting some Syrah. And it was really beautiful. It was up in Wall Road, up in, what was it? Kind of the Maya Camus range. Beautiful vineyard. And so that day I had met Diego once before, but this was like our kind of first time kind of re-talking. And I just picked his ear for a long time. And I was like, how do I get into working in the vineyards if I didn't go to school for it? Like, how do I just, I was like, can I get your number? Can we talk? And I just picked his ear for like a solid hour, and he was gracious enough to help me out. And I did the same thing with Steve Mathiasen. And I was just like, how do I get my foot in the door? Yeah. So then about, I think 3 or 4 months later, the guys posted about needing some help. And so I saw the job listing and I immediately texted him, and I was like, I know I'm not qualified for this on paper, but I'm willing to learn quickly. Like, will you maybe think about letting me on the team? Yeah. So kind of the rest is history. They took a chance, and I've learned how to drive tractors up these crazy stony cliffs and, mow and do all the things that you need to do and fix implements on the back of the tractor and, this is the third growing season that I've been with them.
Okay.
And then, it's also been really great because I make my wine out of their space.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, it's been great. This is going to be my third vintage as well, coming up in 23. So,
Nice.
I'm pretty excited.
You've made the Ribolla Gialla and the Barbera, all three vintages?
So, yes. So this will be my third coming up. So two vintage so far. Yeah. So I've made the skin fermented Ribolla Gialla and the partially carbonic Barbera. This year, I'm about to release a Pinot from Mendocino as well.
Oh, nice.
And then a Lambrusco style Old Vine Zinfandel. That'll be released last, but yes,
very fun.
Super fun. The Zinfandel came from two of the vineyards that I work with the guys.
Okay.
So right next to Buena Vista Vineyard, there's we farm two vineyards, which is really pretty and old, and the fruit was really great. So I bought some. So I was like, now I'm a vineyard.
Yeah.
Jokingly, of course.
Yeah. How did you decide on the vineyards that the vineyard that you're working with out in Lodi? What attracted you to that area in the vineyard?
Well, first of all, Lodi has the most varieties planted in the ground of all of California because they don't have I don't want to put it down, but the pizzazz of like Napa or Sonoma. So as far as grape prices, it's a little more relative. So you can plant whatever you want there, which is great because the growers are interested in planting more than Cabernet, Pinot, and Chardonnay. And the soils are fertile. There's not water problems. And so they have a lot of everything. They have Spanish varietals, they have Greek varietals, they have Italian varietals. So what drew me to this vineyard specifically is that I was looking for Ribolla Gialla. That was what I really wanted to work with. The Barbera, to be honest, was kind of like an afterthought because I really just wanted to start with one. And it was like my head and my heart set on Ribolla Gialla. I just love how versatile that grape is. I love that she's like the queen for me, like there's a lot of different things and a lot of varietals out there, but I really love how deep and there's so much complexity in this grape varietal that I really love most of the wines that I try. And so from the northern Italy or southern Italy, I really have always loved all the things I've tried. And even here in California, I think it does well. So I asked Steve because he grows Ribolla, and I asked, Megan, hey, can you help me?
Yeah.
And I couldn't find Ribolla anywhere. And I was working a bottling line, and the person who was doing the bottling line was like overheard a conversation. I was talking to a couple people, and he's like, I think I know somebody. And so he gave me Dwight's number, which is the grower. And I reached out to him. I went and visited a vineyard. He's fourth generation Italian, and he really wanted to do it right. So he kind of did his due diligence. And, the vineyard is planted mostly Italian varietals. This year I'm going to get a little Nero de Avola as well, which is fun.
Fun, yeah.
He has a little Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet as well, because I think, people like to drink that. So,
gotta pay the bills too.
Right. But beautiful, like organically farmed, sandy loam soils, like really in a great spot. Clement Hills has, it's a lot of wind. It's pretty windy.
Yeah.
So it has that kind of ministral winds where, the vines don't overripe. They kind of shut down when it gets too hot because of the winds.
Yeah.
So it keeps its acidity really well, and it's just a pretty location. And so far, I've really enjoyed working with the vineyard. So I'm happy to keep working with the vineyard. And I've worked with other vineyards, mostly through, looking for who's farming organically and sustainably and kind of what I can get in a certain price point. But I would love to work with mostly just Italian varietals because that's what I like to drink. And, you end up drinking most of your wine anyways. So, might as well make something you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. How would you describe your winemaking style?
I have different ideas of kind of like what I want to go with. So for this, the first go at it, I really wanted to make, a skin contact Ribolla Gialla because I love the history of it and I love what I've tasted in the past. But I wanted to do kind of like a lighter expression. Just because I wanted to see how it was going to be received, you know?
Okay.
I really love Grosvenor and like Rustic and, Radicon, and I can drink those and I love them. There's definitely a time and place for those. It's not where you start when you're starting your, wine brand, at least for a newbie, So I wanted to make something prettier and more accessible to people when they think of orange wine.
Yeah.
The Barbera was kind of kismet because I was walking through the vineyard and I'm trying the fruit just off the vines. And I'm walking and I'm like, see Barbera, and I like, eat a berry and I'm just like, wow, this tastes really good. And I was like, hey, Dwight, can I get a ton of this as well? And so ever since then, I've been getting the two. But yeah, really, really yummy things. And Barbera, again, is another fun grape varietal, has a lot of history in Piemonte. People in Piemonte, yes, Nebbiolo is the king, but Barbera is what they drink every day, and they don't export it as much because that's what they drink there. So they kind of keep it to themselves. And, has great acid, has great structure, but it also is like plush and a lot of fruit. So it's just an enjoyable wine. I also wanted to make a red wine that my mom would understand, and her, I like to drink natural wines, but my approach is delicious first. And, you want to honor the grape varietal. So I do like fun natural wines that taste funky and, there's all these different things. But for me, I guess I'm more into classic styles. So playful ways of making, or a playful play on a classic, basically.
Okay.
So with the Barbera, the partially carbonic, I just wanted it to be a little playful, a little joyful, chillable red that, it's still a Barbera. You still have that structure. It's still classic when you think about it, but just there's a little twist to it. So Ribolla, again, like, just having a delicious wine, but done in an interesting way.
For the Barbera, did you just start fermenting that carbonically and then just take it out of the tank and start crushing it a little earlier than you
half of it was done in a carbonic, true carbonic maceration. Okay. And then the other half was just macerated on the skins traditionally.
Oh, okay.
So from the carbonic maceration, I just took the free run juice. I blended it with the macerated fruit. And then that's why it's a little fresher, a little more bubbly, a little more playful. Yeah. So a little lighter version.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you want to stay focused mostly with the Italian grapes. So you have the Nero Diavolo and then the Zinfandel. Is that from Mendocino, did you say?
No, the Zinfandel's from Sonoma. Right next to the
right.
Buena Vista Vineyard. And then the Pinot is from Mendocino. And Pinot is just like, the guys were getting a bunch of it and it, it looked really nice and it tasted really good. And I was like, I think every winemaker at one point wants to play with Pinot, right? Because you grew up drinking it and it's still a fun varietal to work with. So I got some and, it's a really light, pretty version of Pinot. It definitely is, aromatic and on the pretty light side. I won't be working with it the next year. Okay. I'm going to be doing an Albarino. I'm going to do the Nero d'Avola. I'm going to do a Rosé. So just kind of like focusing more on things that also are going to be sustainable for California. That's important to me. I think the Pinot is like, hey, I want to play with this. I've never done it before. I did it and it's great, but it's not, if I'm going to think about the ethos of, staying in sustainable or like working with hybrids in the future is something that I'm really interested as well.
Okay. Yeah.
I did make a carboy of hybrid vines that UC Davis let me have some fruit from their experimental block.
Yeah.
That was not for sale, but that's something that I have at my house.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that something you think you're going to try to expand into a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. The future for Ruby Blanca is hopefully one day I'll have land to play with on my own. And for sure, I'm going to plant varietals that make sense for global warming. And I definitely want for hybrids to be part of that conversation. I think, there's a bigger conversation to be had with them in general. And they're starting to plant hybrids in France. So... it's happening and people are paying attention. Burgundy's not going to stay cool forever. Yeah. It's already warming up now. So if you think about wine and its future, you have to kind of move with the times as well.
Are there any current hybrids that you kind of have your eye on or that you've really felt good about, or do you have any favorites?
I mean, I would say like the traditional, the Baco Noirs and things like that. But I haven't done the deep dive of specifically like what I would want to work with.
Yeah.
But yes, that's something I'm looking into like as we speak. You know?
Okay.
Yeah. I worked with a lot of varietals that I'd never heard of. So part of me is like, oh, I really liked how that tastes, but I only know of the one location. So Filoli, the gardens and farms, they have a bunch of hybrid grapes that they also let us pick from and work with from like, Chris works with them and Maria from Mad Marvelous works with them. So they let us pick some of the fruit. So it's like one vine of this and then there's one vine of this and it's just like kind of like a field blend of all these different hybrid grapes. But I wouldn't, I'd have to go and like do a study of which ones I'm actually like specifically looking for.
Yeah, I guess with one vine or two vines of each, it's kind of tough to make any measurable amount of wine from
right. And
from any of them.
It's not very widely planted right now in California, so it's been hard to kind of, other than the first batch that I made to really deep dive in that. North American Press works with a lot of hybrids, and his stuff is really great.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't pretend to know exactly what I'm talking about as far as hybrids. I know that I want to start working with them, but it's not as a deep dive as the other things that
Yeah, I feel like you're sort of even younger here in a weird way. The knowledge isn't really in the
Finger Lakes, they're
yet,
everywhere. But here, not so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the Ruby Blanca name come from?
My grandmother's. So it's Abuelita Rubelia, Ruby, and Abuelita Blanca. That was their names. So they both passed in the last 10 years.
Okay.
So it was kind of, when I think of my background and I think of Colombia, I think of my grandmothers. They were, we have very, very large families. We had a lot of cousins, a lot of siblings, a lot of family, but they were always kind of the, how would you say that? The mother hen of everybody.
Okay.
They were the overseers, the matriarchs. So
yeah,
they just brought so much to everybody's life in my family that I wanted to give part of my personal history and my Colombian history. We honor our matriarchs in Colombia, so I wanted to give an ode to them because that's kind of something that's very innocent and pure in my life that makes me really happy, and my love for my family and my grandmothers. So yeah, I named it after them, and it also means red and white in Spanish. So it's kind of another kind of nod to being a Colombian as well, Colombian American.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to ask you, so the first line kind of your bio said, I take incredible pride in being one of only a few queer, Latinx, and female winemakers. And I was wondering if you could break that down a little bit more for me, or expand on it and how it's influenced kind of your journey to get here in wine. And
yeah, well, I mean, honestly, it's always kind of been a boys' club.
Yeah.
And so, even working with, the best people who, see past that, it's always kind of been, you have to knock at the door a little more forcefully than other people. And, I wrote that, but since then I've met plenty of other queer, female, and Latinx, winemakers. So maybe it's time to change my bio, but I still take a lot of pride that I'm part of that group, because there's not a lot of representation, in wine in general. The terrible word of master somm, that is, it doesn't get talked enough. And I honestly, that's kind of why I went to WSET. Yeah. I didn't want to be a master somm. I didn't think that was when we were thinking about honoring different cultures, I didn't want to be part of the colonizing male, I don't know, just I wanted to be part of a new crew. And yeah, that is important to me because it informs of all the different things that the hurdles I've had to jump, and the people who don't get representation. And, it's I want to honor my family. I want to honor the people that came before me. I also want to honor the original like land stewards. So like if you see on my label,
Yeah.
it says
the Miwok, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Made with grapes grown on the rightful land of the Miwok people.
So it's important for us to honor the people that came here. And, I wasn't part of the United States culture when all of that went down, but, you definitely benefit from it now. And like part of my funds this year will be going, donations to different programs and land back and, queer and just things that I find important, kind of giving back as well. Like it's important to me to like, wine is fun, but it's not, I really enjoy making it. I enjoy drinking it. I enjoy the things that it brings for families, like, having a nice bottle of wine and a celebration of a lot of different things, dates or weddings or, family events. I love how wine brings people together, but at the end of the day, it's a product, right? So it's what goes beyond that. Wine, recognition, bringing people together. All of those things are kind of more the end goal than the making the wine. I love making the wine. I love working outside, and I love the juxtaposition of playing with nature and being its steward. But it's not the most important thing to me. It's the after, like what do you get out of it and how can you bring people together? Yeah.
Do you think there's anything that the wine industry can do to help with more representation? I know that there's things like the 280 Project that are doing great work.
There's a lot of different, I would say startups. And there's a lot of different new, I wouldn't say clubs, but what's the word I'm looking for?
Kind of groups?
Organizations
Okay.
that are bringing more, light to other people who don't get represented. I love the fact that a lot of Black-owned wineries are making their marks, and a lot of the new people who are drinking wine, and enjoying it. Like, I was just in Atlanta, and they have a booming wine scene in Atlanta. There's all these places that, I think as the United States gets more and more comfortable with wine, and it just is something that a lot more people are drinking. And so being included in that conversation is, it's important. I definitely think it's been, lately, at least here in California, I've definitely seen more events of inclusion. I have a friend who throws the co-fermented, the queer, wine events, which has been really fun. Batonage is a women's in wine group, and there's plenty of different new organizations for like promoting women in wine. There's just like a number of different organizations that are working with minorities to give us more of a voice. So I think I would say what people can do listening to on the podcast is buy more wine, because we need dollars to make change, right? We need dollars to keep growing our dreams and to be able to afford the land and to be able to give back to others. I can't give donations if I don't have money in my pocket, so it's just like, put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah. Support producers that are doing the right thing and working thoughtfully. And where do you see the winery in 5-10 years?
Well, hopefully. So Leiloon has moved into a new winery space in Richmond. So from Orinda to Richmond, we are literally they are putting the ground drains in this week. So there's a lot of construction happening. There's a lot of great things. The space itself has not only become a home for Leiloon, but has some other, winemakers in that space as well. They do a little custom crush. Hopefully the next year we'll have a tasting room. I definitely think Richmond's becoming the second wave of, Berkeley, and like having all of the different wineries kind of in a little pocket. And it's a beautiful place. I mean, the water's right there. I mean, we're further away from the water. So Purity is closer to some of the chains are very close to the water. we're a little further in towards the Cutting Boulevard.
Okay.
But there's plenty of things happening in Richmond. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think the more and more expensive everything else gets, like in SF and Oakland and Berkeley, people keep going a little further up, and there's a lot of like new fermentation happening. So
Yeah.
beer and breweries and bread makers and, you know, the Rubicon, the cupcake, the vegan cupcake place that's like pretty.
Oh, is that
That's
are
up
they
in
Richmond?
yeah,
now?
it's in
Okay.
Richmond as well. So, yeah, I hope that we can have a bigger wine community.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that we can do events where we're, you know, honoring the neighborhood as well. And yeah, I hope to see it just grow in general. You know, I think Leilun has been doing a great job of helping other winemakers grow as well. And, you know, the business, I think once you invest in things that are like good things to invest in, it kind of pays its way forward. And so, you know, I'm helping as well to grow that business. So hopefully we'll have a giant tasting room and people come visit and enjoy Ruby Blanca wines and Leilun wines and all of the different people. I hope to have people to focus on, you know, underrepresented, you know, people who are making food. We have so many different amazing food carts and food trucks in Richmond that, yeah, I mean, there's a taco stand in every gas station and they're all really good. So, yeah, I'm happy about that.
Richmond has really changed since I was a child growing up in the Bay Area, and lately though, you're right, it's turned into a really great place for food and for wine and beer. So much community.
Yeah,
there
cider.
now.
You know, you have the Far West cider as well. They're great. Yeah, I only see it getting bigger. You know, By the Way is fun. Subject to Change, like did Friends of Friends, the Stagiaire. We hope to host an event, probably, you know, like called Richmond Ferments, and like just put the spotlight on a bunch of different, you know, interesting things that are happening in Richmond. And, you know, we have the space to do it. We're just making sure that it's all tip top before inviting a bunch of people over.
Yeah. Make sure the house is clean before having guests.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially I have a Colombian mother. I would never be able to show my face in my house if I brought anybody over and it was like, you know, without letting her know first. It was just like, no, what are you doing? My labels are actually my artwork. That's what I went
really?
to. Yeah.
Okay.
So I went to school for art. I got my Bachelor of the Fine Arts at Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. And that's kind of how I got into wine, is because I was working in restaurants as I was doing that. But yeah, I really wanted to be an art history professor.
Okay.
But then there was so much schooling and not many jobs, so I didn't go that route. But I just love the way that art history connects. Like I'm a very visual learner.
Okay.
And I loved the way that art history depicted culture and like history in a different way, right? And so after kind of diving into the history of art history, when I was getting into wine, I felt like there was a lot of pathways in that. There was a lot of similarities, like things that bring people together. Well, when you're thinking about like music and art and culture and all the different ways it ties together, wine is another. It's almost the same in my head. It's like, you know, especially when you're thinking about tasting notes and its musicality, or it's, you know, when you close your eyes and you're just like, wow, you see colors, like it just it ties into each other. So I love how it connects people, and the history of, you know, it's definitely changed, and it's definitely still changing. I mean, I think people, you know, as much as I keep it basic, you know, and just try to keep it as natural as possible, like there's so many different things that you can do with wine that, you know, different things you can play with music or art. So for me, that was another thing that I found really interesting. It was just diving into a whole new other way of learning world history and connecting people. So yeah, I mean, the first year I had my art on my labels. This year I'll have my art on my labels, but next year I hope to start putting other artists and giving other artists space on my labels and changing them every vintage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I want to do that. I mean, I think the first 2 years I just want to do a little label recognition,
Sure.
but as I grow, I also want to give representation to other people. And there's so many fun things happening with label art these days and art in general that I kind of want to keep up with the times and, give other people a voice.
What's kind of your medium of choice for art?
So I learned very traditionally, very classically. So Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts was the first art/academy in the United States. It was modeled. Wow. It was modeled after the French Academy.
Okay.
So figure drawing and figure painting and learning gross anatomy from cadavers. Like we actually did that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I studied Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. Seriously, they followed the same. This is the color wheel, but having to do all the different, But from there, and the fun thing, and actually my favorite American artists when I was in college were the Bay Area abstract expressionists, Richard Diepenkorn and Nathan Oliveira. Mm-hmm. And so when I started kind of playing jazz with my art per se, it's a mixed media. So it's a lot of large scale abstract expressionist paintings made on really thick kind of lithography paper.
Okay.
And then I make handmade paper that gets embedded. So there's acrylic, there's gouache, there's watercolor, there's oil bars. It's mixed media, but very tactile. And it's about color, structure. There's always a playful medium between nature and man-made structures. When I lived in the city, I really loved seeing these big buildings that had a lot of patterns and structure, but then finding kind of similar patterns in nature and have it be more fluid. Mm-hmm. And so having kind of a little bit of both, so your eye kind of just moves around. Yeah.
Yeah. How big is the original piece?
This one's not as big as the other. So the green label on the Barbera, that one is 6 feet by 8 feet.
Okay.
And I actually have it in my house.
Okay.
This one is, I'm trying to think, it's probably 5 feet by 3 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not as big, but still decent size. My biggest painting was 16 by 16. So big. I was part of the Philadelphia Muralist project.
Okay.
So I worked on big murals outside, and it was really fun. They focus a lot on that. So there's a lot of history with murals in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. So I got to work on a lot of those. When I was in Florida, I helped John Whalen. He's the one that paints all the whales and the underwater landscapes in different cities. So most cities has John Whalen. But when I was in high school, I was like, I love this. I actually almost went to school for what's that called? Marine biology, because I really love the ocean as well. I love water. But so doing a John Whalen painting, a big mural of whales was kind of both places where I love whales. This is great. So.
Are you still working?
Yeah,
in art?
Yeah, I still, but not for pleasure. Mm-hmm. I got a little burnt out after college. When you're working with galleries, they tend to want you to continue making the same thing that's selling.
Okay.
And there's a little bit of pressure there. It was a little less organic. So now since I don't have to work with somebody, I just kind of work at my pace. Mm-hmm. And lately, I haven't had much time to do that since I've been focusing with wine. But I hope to have a winery with a giant studio one day and just have all my friends and a farm and let's go off the grid.
Nice. That's a great label.
Thank you.
The Barbera one is fun too. It's really eye-catching.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, yeah, it's funny. I had a friend who was like, don't put your art on your labels. I was like, what? No way. I think this label, it's probably my favorite just because the way the orange wine underneath just makes all the colors pop. Mm. But the Barbera, I chose to do it in clear glass because I wanted you to see the color of the wine, but then it just played really well with the label because it's like a deep green. So, like, complementary colors and yeah. So there's always a little bit of art nerd behind the decision making and what color glass. This year I'm going with darker glass just because I want you to be able to age the red wine if you want to. And part of having it in clear glass was because it was chuggable. The new Barbera is going to be a little more rustic, a little like more, it's going to be a little deeper. So definitely not, I would say not more serious, but just a little more ageable. So I wanted to keep it in a glass. I would keep it.
Is that a little less of the carbonic?
So last time I just used the free run juice from the carbonic.
Okay.
And so this year I used all of the carbonic, the macerated carbonic, the pressed carbonic, and the free run juice.
Yeah.
So it's still playful, but it's a little deeper. It's a little, more brooding. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did you make the Nero Gialla?
I haven't yet.
Oh, no, you haven't yet.
I haven't yet. I'm getting it this year.
I was looking forward to it.
I was like, me too. I want it now. I was just thinking, my brother-in-law keeps asking me, he's like, when are you making rosé? It's so funny because he's like 6'3", and he's like, I just want to drink rosé all the time. He's like this big man, but I keep, I'm like, that'll be later. But I just thinking this past summer, I was like, man, I really want a rosé. So, if you make it, you drink it. So I'm like, I'm going to make it this year.
Your Zin, the sparkling Zin, is that made in a kind of a pet nat style, or is that more of a traditional style? Pet nat? Okay.
Yeah, or pet nat.
Okay.
But it'll be fun because it's, with Lambruscos, it can go a lot of different ways, but this will be definitely a little off dry and kind of just, it's still structured, but it has that like juicy fruit. And yeah, I think I'm excited to see how it's going to turn out. I haven't bottled it just yet. So, or I mean, I have, but it's not fully done. I haven't opened it yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Disgorged.
Yeah.
Topped off still.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see how it's going to turn out. And I definitely have been spreading out how I release the wines. Because last year I released the Barbera and the Ribolla all at once. So, just for money flow, it's better to spread it out. Right. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where can people track down some of your wines?
First of all, you can go on RubyBlancaWines.com. It has a full list and map of where I have, locations, retail, restaurants, bars. I'm updating it as we speak. I just have a bunch of new allocations this year. So mostly California. I'm only selling in California for now. I have some sales trips down to LA, San Diego, Santa Cruz, just other areas outside the Bay Area. Last year, I focused mostly on East Bay and San Francisco.
Okay.
So this year, I'm going to North Bay. I'm doing a trip to Sacramento, like trying to get it all over California. I did take it to Texas for Wild World ferments, and it was really well received, but just because I don't have as much of it, it's small production, keeping it local for now. Yeah, but growing. So hopefully if I do send it to different states, I probably will start, I'll send it to Texas and Florida, which is hilarious, but it's because I want my parents to be able to get it without shipping it to them. So yeah, Miami has actually a huge new natural wine scene that's booming. Texas as well. It's a really fun, especially Austin. It was really fun to go there. A lot of really fun natural wine bars. So yeah. I mean, obviously New York and all of the traditional places would be great to have my wine. And for sure I wanted, where I used to live. But I'm thinking of, start small first. So,
yeah.
Smaller wine regions where you're not competing with like a million people.
Okay. Yeah.
So before making wine, I always wanted to have my own wine shop. So a lot of people dream of having your winery, your tasting room, your vineyards. Part of me still would really want to just have a wine shop and do all the rest. Obviously, I know you can't sell your own wine in your shop because it's not allowed. 3-tier system, whatever, boo-hoo. But part of me still enjoys selling wine and drinking a lot of different wines. And one of the different things about living in New York compared to living in California is, New York drinks everything all over the world. I feel like California really drinks California, which for me as a winemaker living in California, that's great because you have, it's local, you're supporting small winemakers. But I do miss the variety of drinking other, wine regions that are like coming about just like us. Like Australia's really interesting, and there's a lot of cool things happening there. And just like a lot of the newer wine regions like South America, there's a lot of fun things. I am looking into see if my uncle will let me plant vines in our farm in Colombia.
Oh, okay.
So just kind of like having a little bit of everything, having fun, not taking it super serious. I think part of I don't know. I feel like I don't take myself as serious as other people do. I feel like people make winemaking their ethos, like I definitely enjoy what I'm doing, but it's a little more fluid. It's like something I enjoy. I enjoy sharing wine with people. I enjoy drinking wine with people, but I'm definitely never going to think like I'm an expert or that my opinion matters more than anybody else's opinion, right? Like that's not the type of person I am. And so the wines are like things that I like to drink, and I want to bring joy to other people. So hopefully they'll enjoy them as well. And, it's going to be a little more organic. Like I would love to have land. I would love to do all these things. Sign me up for a hippie commune. I'll totally do that. Like have coffee and good food and like, tiny little farm or whatever that little documentary, that's a dream. But I mean, to be able to do it here doesn't seem feasible. So
what would you plant in Colombia if you could?
Oof, I don't.
Or if you can.
I mean, kind of the same stuff we've been talking about. I would, honestly, I'd have to see what the soil types are because that's, there's things you like to drink, but it doesn't grow. The soil types and the drainage and like when you're nerding out and you're really thinking of like the nitty gritty of growing, you want to make sure it's a site that's going to make sense together. So it's basically, if I were to plant a vineyard, I'd have to see the right site, the right aspect, the right rootstock, like kind of all of that nerdy stuff that you're like, man, this is not as fun to talk about, but it is, well, but
it might not be as fun to talk about, but you need it.
Oh, so for sure. I mean,
it's important.
All good wine is made in the vineyard. And like, when you take care of the land and, you feed it the right nutrients and you create biodiversity, that really does make a difference when you're like fermenting. You don't have stuck fermentations. You don't have to add a bunch of things to your wine, which is kind of where the idea of natural wine comes from. I think that people get hung up on this idea of like, oh, 0.0 is natural wine. I was like, well, that's part of it. And some people choose to add sulfur and people don't choose to add sulfur. There's already sulfur in the grapes anyways, right? There's sulfur in bananas. There's natural sulfur in actual like wine and grapes and food. This is the problem when you have ADHD. And I was like, how's this going to work for me? I'm like doing a podcast and I lose my train of thought all the time.
Well, I think you were saying that the wine is made in the vineyard.
For sure.
And that you have to take that into account. It's not just not adding anything in the winery. It starts way before that. What it sounded like you were
for sure
going to say.
Yeah, no, it definitely starts there. That would be the most important. I mean, like, honestly, I'm at a place where I'm buying grapes, but I do my due diligence of like who's doing what and how they're doing it, and what's their like thought process. Again, I'm not an expert, but I do know kind of like the building blocks of like what makes sense. And that's what I want to promote with my wine. Because then it's tasty. Yeah. And so find my wines on rubyblancawines.com. You can follow us on Instagram. So Ruby_Blanca_wines.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Thanks for listening today to our discussion with Sabrina. The Ruby Blanca wines are really worth checking out with bright flavors that go really well with food. Barbera and Ribolla Gialla are the only ones released so far, but look out for the Lambrusco style Zin, the Pinot, Nero Diavla, and who knows, maybe a rosé or hybrid wine. You can find the wines at rubyblancawines.com or follow on Instagram, Ruby_Blanca_wines. You You can follow the podcast on wherever you're listening and the Instagram at Indie Wine Podcast. And feel free to email indiewinepodcast@gmail.com with comments, questions, or feedback. If you can tell your wine friends about the podcast too and help spread the word, I'd really appreciate it. Rating or subscribing helps also. There's also now a Patreon set up if you feel like supporting the podcast monetarily to hopefully allow for more episodes, more travel, and to help defray other costs. Link is in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode. Have a good one.